You know, out of like any other tier list I've done so far on my channel, like between like the player cruisers, the weapons, the crew, drones, all the other relevant and cool tier lists I've done, I feel like this one for sure is gonna be like the most thought-provoking one. Because throughout like my multiverse experience, like between just playing the game the past 2 years, a lot of like FTL, this base FTL experience, and just a lot of different kinds of analysis between like the past year I've spent just doing this game anyway, like completing my save profile, like playing on. I mean, I've always played on hard extreme, of course, but like I've done different approaches to my runs throughout like a lot of time, and like the choices I made in sectors have probably been like the most undetermined ones, like undetermined choices I've done throughout like my entire playtime. Like there's times like present day where I still really don't know if like choosing one sector over the other is still the accurate choice. Obviously, I wouldn't be making a tier list if I had no clue what I was talking about, but you know, sectors have just always been a really interesting FTL variable. Like in base game, sure as hell in multiverse, with the grand scheme of like like almost 70 different sectors to go to. It's definitely been like, it's a really interesting thing to talk about for, like the roguelike that FTL is. And I really haven't seen like many discussions before about sectors. I've seen weapons, I've seen like Kira, I've seen, I don't know, true ending, like all this other stuff. But I really haven't seen someone dive into the sectors of multiverse. And 5.4 just came out like 3 weeks ago, I think, or something close to that. So we got a whole bunch of different kinds of stuff to look at here. I mean, of course, like it's not like the game was like did a 180 and now it's like a whole new meta. But I think in general, there's a lot of different stuff to talk about for sectors and whatnot. So, for the video though, and moving on, this tier list will include every single sector minus like basically any kind of irrelevant sector, which would mean like the Realm of Madness, for example, where you fight her. Like, I don't really know if I have to rank that, like, let's be real here. Or the Node 17, the regular Sector 8, if you take the standard multiverse path. Like, it's not like a useless sector to, like, evaluate, but, in terms of, like, the other 7 sectors you are visiting throughout your run, it just feels like, you gotta be, like, much more aware on where you're gonna go between sectors, like, 2 and 7, versus just, like, I don't know, like, hard playing around flagship, if you get what I'm saying. So in any case, that's pretty much what we got going on for today. All of the regular generic sectors, the unique sectors, and then the secret sectors. So I think without further ado, we can just get straight into this. I guess one more footnote would be, my original plan for this video was to kind of like do a, not even, I mean, I would still like rank them and tier the individual like sectors, but my idea was kind of doing like a presentation kind of thing on it instead of just like, just monologuing and yapping about, this tier list on screen right now. But I kind of figured that between like my adequate enough explanations, and if I do manage to not like fuck up articulating and translating my thoughts about each sector, it probably doesn't need that much more like I don't need a bunch of data on screen. I think between me getting my point across and just in general knowing how these sectors function anyway, as any kind of player that you've ever been, experienced or not, I think I can get my point across without putting on like a whole damn show, if you get what I'm saying. So but there are definitely some sectors here that I'm gonna have to dive pretty deep into because, ooh boy, there's, I mean, of course, there's some sectors like the Ancient Recovery Site, and then you got some sectors like a fucking, I don't know, like Dustbringer Controlled and whatever. But there's a lot of contrast in this list, but there's also a lot of depth, if you get what I'm saying. So, I mean, yeah. With that off the way, let's get right into this. So, up first, we have the civilian controlled, or just the Union sectors, for example. Union sectors are an allied or friendly generic. They can appear between, I think, Sector 2 and, well, wait, Sector 2? Yeah, Sector 2 and Sector 6, I believe. There's some kinds of generic sectors that can spawn at Sector 7, despite, the Sector 7 being, like, a guaranteed unique. But, for in terms of, like, the, majority of the generic sectors, the civilian follows, the Union sector follows suit pretty well. It's overall pretty straightforward. It's pretty close to its same dynamic in vanilla. Vanilla, like the base multiverse, unmodded pretty much everything. The civilian sector is one of the best sectors, just overall. It's got pretty much the exact same amount of fights and scrap and stores and all kinds of good events as like any other sector, but it's just less dangerous and just as rewarding. In Multiverse, it's pretty close to that, but there's a bit more variability in it, obviously. I think for one good point I could say about it is that Civilian kind of became like a pirate sector in terms of like the fights and scrap potential you can get from it. And obviously, like, Civilian can be pretty chill at times. It can be pretty laid back. Like, if you don't want to get to a bunch of fights inside a Civilian sector, it's kind of, it's doable. Like, you could hunt down stores just fine, hopefully, without some, like, horrendous RNG. But I say, like, pirate in the sense where, like, it's similar to pirate sector, because of the difference that the large pool of events and fight potential, like, between enemies and such. For Civilian, there's pretty much, like, virtually every kind of faction can appear inside a Civilian. Besides, like, the obvious, like, secret ones. Like, you're not going to see some damn obelisk in a Civilian sector or anything like that. But you can definitely see elites. You can see just, human vessels, like Union or Federation, Militia, whatever. You can see Hive Mantis. You can see Free Mantis. You can see Zoltans. Like, there's a lot of different ships you can see here. But in general, between the events and fights can be kind of variable, but you can always have the same approach to Civilian sector. Like, there's no like big surprise at the end of or throughout a Civilian sector. Like, you're going to the sector knowing you got like 3 or 4 stores accessible to you. The fights aren't going to be crazy unless like FTL is FTL and you get like a Sector 4 like Rebel bomber with like 3 systems, but like 3 auxiliary systems. But besides that, like, really predictable sector, very good scrap count. Human vessels like militia, EDC, even just Union ships for that matter. They're pretty predictable in their equipment layout. Like, they aren't gonna have some absurdly powerful systems all the time, especially like militias and whatnot. But yeah, overall a really nice sector. This is definitely like a really good sector to visit in like Sector 2 or 3. Because of just the potential, like, powerful like ship layouts don't really start spawning until about Sector 4 or 5. Excluding Renegades obviously. And Civilian is just a really nice, it's a really nice starting point for a sector. Like, you can basically start snowballing off Civilian sectors pretty easily. There's not a lot of risk in going Civilian at all. It's a solid sector. I'll put in A tier because it's just really nice overall. I was considering B tier, but considering that you could literally win the run just based off 7 Civilian sectors, I'm not gonna like be displeased by having going Civilian multiple times over. It's a plenty good sector. Up next is Rebel Controlled. Rebel Controlled is really interesting because I do a lot of vanilla comparisons here, but it's just for the sake of like understanding what sectors really are in the early game. It's best to compare it to vanilla. Rebel Controlled are a really good mix between rebellion vessels like humans and whatnot, but also a lot of auto ships, surprisingly. It plays overall kind of similar to Civilian though. I would really consider it just a more aggressive Civilian sector. There's going to be less stores, like, between just, like, stores you can go to. There's things like store distresses, though, which are obviously quite good. It's a fight before the store, so, it's kind of, it's like scrap before a store kind of thing. But some events can be kind of bad for you. I think the main ones, the only bad events I can think of for, like, Rebel Controlled all revolve around, like, the auto ships. For example, like, free shield hack events, or maybe just a really beefy auto ship once in a great while. But otherwise, it's still a fine sector, I think. Rebels they're pretty similar to militia in terms of like what their system combinations can be. Rebels really don't often have like a crazy array of like systems and such, at least in the early game. Of course, this is a rebel controlled sector, so it's like I don't expect you to be meeting too many bombers or marauders, which will have like all kinds of like good weapons, you know, cloaking, hacking, all kinds of stuff like that. But I think it's really comparable to civilian sector in terms of dynamic. It's a bit more risky because obviously just less store potential, and there's a lot more fights going on. You know, obviously a lot less neutral encounters, a lot more hostile encounters. You know, you basically go to a beacon, you engage in a fight right away, versus like, you know, civilian where you can kind of click through a few options and then fight. Rebel is just more hostile, but hostile doesn't always mean bad, of course. So I would still consider it not like superior to civilian by any means, but it's definitely really formidable. So I'll put it in B tier. Pirate controlled, as I mentioned before, is basically like another civilian sector, but not exactly, because pirate is a lot more like aggressive in its encounters. Because pirate vessels, ironically enough, they don't really like fuck around. Pirates can be really dangerous sometimes, especially this is a pirate controlled sector, and pirate controlled can have some really nasty like pirate ship layouts. Like for example, like Zoltan pirates, or like Orchid pirates, for example, with like mind control, cloaking, kernel weapons, Zoltan shields, as I mentioned before. Pirates really, sometimes, not all the time, of course, but pirates can tend to, like, not, they don't joke around. Like, pirates are gonna kill you if they're gonna want to kill you, kind of thing. And pirate definitely has a lot of good scrap potential in the sector, like between the guard, and the store distresses. The amount of fights you're getting, it's not a bad sector for scrap, it's just dangerous, if you get what I'm saying. If you're prepared, obviously it's going to be just fine, and if you happen to have like a sales sector for, as you're pirate controlled, the Hector ships can be interesting to kill for like, you know, more scrap and whatnot. Because the Hector stores are basically just it's basically a store distress in a lot of different ways. You can either, well, store distress, you always have to fight the ship to then access the store, but for Hector stores, you can always choose to either get the store or kill them, and most of the time it's going to be kill, but obviously sometimes you can benefit off stores. So I think all in all, pirate controlled is definitely not bad. It just can be pretty dangerous. I'll put it probably the same tier as Rebel. I would not go here every single time. Same kind of thing as like not the same thing as like a civilian, for example. But I definitely am not going to complain about going to pirate controlled if I'm not like behind, of course. Mantis controlled though is like probably like the first C tier kind of sector we have here. Mantis controlled it's very, very close to its dynamic in like in vanilla. Mantis sectors can very often have a lot of empty beacons. And not empty beacons in the sense like, oh, it's only a storage check, but empty beacons in the sense where it's like an event where it doesn't really yield you any good rewards. Like for example, 10 jumps inside of civilian sector versus 10 jumps inside a Mantis sector. On average, there's going to be a lot more like scrap potential in the civilian sector than there's going to be in the Mantis controlled. In addition to Mantis ships being quite formidable, obviously Mantis boarding, Mantis bombers. The Mantis God can be surprisingly lethal at times, in the Suzerain vessel at least. There's not a lot of stores here, and even when like you have a good amount of fights to go, against Mantis vessels, it's really like no good crazy rewards. Like for example, there's some specific factions and races in the game that if you crew kill, have a really good chance of giving you extra equipment. Like for example, elites is like one obvious one, but also things like crystals and I think free mantis, but I don't really know for sure on that. In any case, mantis really only have like 2 good outcomes for any time you crew kill them. Like you basically have like a chance to get an NG or maybe just double rewards if you like save a Federation ship from a mantis. That event isn't super common though, and even if it was, I would not. It wouldn't catapult the Mantis sector into like, you know, A or B. So it's definitely not bad. Like it isn't like lethal to go here, especially if like your other choice might be something even more dangerous. But if you have a choice between like Mantis and something like higher above like its tier, I definitely would not choose like Mantis every single time, you know. At least the scrap potential of Mantis isn't bad though. That's the one thing that some other hostile sectors sometimes struggle with, like the scrap potential of it. Mantis is really just it's got good scrap. It's just really dangerous sometimes. And of course, I kind of said that thing for the pirate, and the pirate control is higher than Mantis, but pirates are like obviously sometimes more dangerous, but Mantis are just like inevitably gonna be a pain in the ass unless you get some like god ship that just doesn't care about boarding or, you know, anything like that. But moving off of Mantis, we have the rock controlled. Rock controlled is pretty similar to Mantis. Instead of just dealing with a lot of strong like boarders, you're really just dealing with really bulky ships that have a pretty good array of systems. They very often have like kernel weapons or missile weapons or really just a lot of firepower across the board. Really it has no higher scrap potential than something like the Mantis controlled would be. I think specifically though for gun shipping, the rock controlled can often be easier to deal with, but considering the rock controlled has no real like exquisite events that you always want to visit, like it's really just a bunch of fights, less stores, and often it's just dangerous. I definitely would not consider this to be like an amazing sector to go to, but sometimes it can be alright. Like if your boarding's really formidable, and maybe if your gunship is also really nice, rock controlled is still okay to visit. Dustbringer controlled is definitely one of the worst sectors in the game though. Not gonna quite put in F tier because there are sometimes rare circumstances where maybe the Dustbringer controlled can be alright. Dustbringer controlled is really just a Zoltan sector with even more dangerous Zoltans. And what I mean by that, it's not even by like a crew effect by like Dustbringers, you know, in themselves, but Dustbringer vessels really don't mess around. Like they, obviously besides the fact of always Zoltan shields, Dustbringer vessels are basically Zoltan ships that have a teleporter. They aren't any weaker than regular Zoltan cruisers. They have, not cruisers, but Zoltan enemy ships. They have basically the exact same system loadouts. They have dangerous systems at that, you know, cloaking, mind control, hacking, not quite drone control, but obviously, you know, like the teleporter and such can obviously makes Dustbringers that much more lethal. I wouldn't say like, I don't know, I wouldn't say this is a death sentence to go here all the time, but it's really annoying. It's a pain in the ass to fight Dustbringers. It's a pain in the ass to fight Zoltans for that matter. So between the Dustbringer sector just being super dangerous in the early game, the boarding against Dustbringers, like it works. You can win the fight just fine, but you know it really just takes like one or two strong Dustbringer ships to like nail you down, and it's just over. Like Dustbringer dropships, for example, where they have like 6 Dustbringers, 4-tile teleporter, mind control, in addition to like, you know, a weapon system that can be allowed to roll like missiles or anything like that. It can be pretty nasty. I definitely wouldn't say this is always a 100% skip, but it's not a good sector to go to. It's just really not. I'm not like, I'm really, I would say 90% of the time I'm really avoiding Dustbringers. Like, that's just flat out how it works. Coalition control is honestly a really, really good sector, though. I'm considering putting this in A tier, but I think just for the sake of it being coalition vessels, I'm going to put it in B tier. Coalition is a really similar dynamic to the pirate controlled. A lot of different fights. Stores are actually not too bad inside coalition, but you're often going to be fighting a lot of coalition vessels. Coalition are, they're one of the strongest factions, I'd say, in the game in terms of, like, enemy loadouts. Besides the fact they have all kinds of, like, effects on their own ship of, like, rock plating, pheromones, breach sealant, and whatever else. They also have a lot of good system loadouts they can roll. They very consistently have cloaking and hacking, and boarding is not too rare either. And it's basically obviously a combination of the 4 races of leeches, slugs, mantis rocks, and those races are not very fun to fight all the time, of course. Especially when they board you with like mantis and leech or mantis and rock, it can be kind of dangerous. But honestly, if you're prepared for a coalition sector in terms of gunship or boarding, it's a very profitable sector because coalition sectors very often have nebulas. Compared to everything else here, really doesn't have nebulas super often, but Coalition very often has nebulas. Coalition nebulas are very stacked in fights in terms of like gaining rewards, gaining scrap from like a fight. There's a lot of fights to be had, but not like a lot of lethal fights, if you get what I'm saying. So the scrap potential is really good for Coalition. The only drawback being you're fighting Coalition vessels, and that can sometimes get in the way. But otherwise, I'm just fine killing off Coalitions. Like I sometimes go to Coalition over Civilian just for the sake of getting all these different kinds of fights, Because there is sometimes arguments to be made like, oh, avoid the friendly just for the sake of like stores and whatever else. But obviously in vanilla that logic doesn't work. But for Multiverse, it's been tweaked a good amount where the hostile sectors are actually most of the time more hostile. And based off the way the Coalition dynamic works, is just a lot of enemies, a lot of scrap to be had. Stores are still existent, of course. I think it's a really good sector to go to still. Abandoned sector is a really, really interesting sector, though. I think for the sake of the early game, and considering abandoned sector would be like it's a generic sector, I'll put it in B tier. Abandoned sector is a very, very similar dynamic to vanilla, where abandoned sector past like sector 4 or 5 can be really dangerous in terms of bombers you go against, the bomber vessels you fight at least. But in the early game, like the first like 2 or 3 sectors, the abandoned sector can be very, very rewarding. In terms of like event layout, the abandoned sector isn't too far from pirate, but abandoned sectors can basically host every single kind of faction in the game, similar to civilian. Like you can fight pirates, you can fight Zoltans, you can fight auto ships, you can fight rebels, you can fight your allies, you can fight orchids. There's a lot of different people you can fight here. In addition to the sector being able to get sail sectors, sail beacons, like the Hector stores, this is definitely a really good sector, I would say. Landless vessels can sometimes be a bit awkward to fight, and of course, if you get unlucky, you can sometimes fight vagabonds. Granted, vagabonds aren't like stacked enemies, but they don't really. Vagabond vessels across the board don't give a lot of good rewards. It's often like low scrap, versus like fighting a bunch of like regular aerobic cruisers or vessels where you get, potentially like a 90 scrap beacon because of double rewards or whatnot. I think one of my favorite events in the abandoned sector though would be the one where you is it abandoned? I'm pretty sure it's abandoned. It might be Uncharted, but either way, it's a distress beacon where like you basically want to track down like a drop ship or something that like entered like a restricted area of space. You follow them through. You kill the enemy that's there and you get like a double reward with like augment or something like that. Now I think about it, I'm pretty sure it's a nebula beacon, but it definitely exists in abandoned. I've seen it before. It's a really good event, and considering the abandoned sector really has nothing strictly bad about it besides maybe the variability in enemies, it's a very formidable sector overall. Like I do not mind going to abandoned a lot of times, even with boarding. That kind of cares about breathing oxygen. The early game abandoned sectors really aren't that stacked. Like you're gonna be fighting like 3 enemies on their own ship with like if you board, and unless you really can't afford boarding in O2 lists, landings are not that hard to kill off. And obviously the other factions are in their own ways difficult or not. But in any case, abandoned is just fun to go to. Automated shipyards though is probably like a C tier-ish sector. It's not any better than a regular rebel controlled, but now we have strictly auto ships, and auto ships aren't really that fun to play around. Auto ships can run away mid-fight, like a lot of different kind of auto ships can. There's no increased rewards between the automated sectors and the regular rebel controlled or just any other hostile sector. It's really basically like it's the same amount of scrap in terms of like fights and maybe store potential. But then it's like more dangerous because of the way auto ships can load out their setups and whatnot. In addition to auto ships being able to run away a lot. Like auto ships are just pussies, for the lack of a better word. So like it's definitely not like a death sentence. It's not like lethal to go to the automated sector, but it's not like rewarding either, Slot controlled is probably like a B-ish, maybe C tier ship. I'll put like low B, high C tier. Slot controlled is another similar dynamic to Coalition. a lot of fights to be had, but maybe I should put in C tier. Okay, I'll put in C tier just for the sake of the events. Slugs have a lot of good fight opportunities. You can get a lot of scrap from slug vessels, and slugs as crew aren't very like tanky or strong by any means. But there's a lot of different events and a lot of different ship layouts inside the slug control that can get really dangerous. For example, anything like an O2 hack, medical system hack, maybe if they just roll a lot of good systems. Slugs often can roll like multiple auxiliary systems, things like cloaking, hacking, and mind control. And slugs just don't mess around. Like I don't know. Like I in my heart, I would consider it a B tierish sector because if you're prepared, slug ships aren't that lethal. But I can see it. Like if things go wrong inside a slug sector, they're gonna go wrong really fast. And I think that's the part that makes it like a C tierish ship, because if slug controlled were like predictable and they were just a bit less stacked in like system combinations, I could see it being a B tierish sector. But considering that slugs don't play around a lot, and the events aren't any better than something you could visit inside, like example, like a coalition sector, it's basically just a strictly more dangerous sector for the same amount of rewards. And for that reason, I'll just put in like C tier, because it's not like not a death sentence to go to slug controlled, but it's not really fun. Vagabond is probably another D-ish, C-ish tier ship. I would say probably like low C tier. It's not quite like bad to go to. It's not like a Dustbringer sector, of course, but Vagabonds are just really just annoying to deal with. So Vagabond is interesting because it's not a dangerous sector, but it's a very unrewarding sector. Vagabond vessels do not give you a lot of good rewards for killing them off. It's very often low scrap or medium scrap, and very little events or double rewards and whatnot. That said, ghost vessels can sometimes be a cup of tea if you have like anaerobic boarding, or maybe for some reason you want to assemble a ghost boarding party. Vagabond can be okay then, but for the grand scheme of runs where you don't always benefit off just killing Vagabonds to begin with, or visiting Dynasty's stores or anything like that, I just don't think Vagabond is just a good sector to go to. The fights and danger level is definitely not too high, but it's really not rewarding to go to a Vagabond sector. Like a Vagabond sector, if you choose Vagabond over like something like Civilian or another just goated sector, you're gonna notice your scrap is quite low at times. But otherwise, it's okay sector. It's definitely not dangerous. It's not a death sentence. It's just kind of unrewarding. If you have to go to Vagabond over Dustbringer, though, you will go Vagabond, of course. But in any case, it's okay. It's C tier. I consider Vagabond to be C tier sector for sure. Harmony control, though, is probably not like A or B tier. I'm gonna put a B tier just because NG vessels can sometimes be dangerous. The scrap potential inside Harmony can be just as good as Civilian, for that matter, but NG ships can sometimes be pretty dangerous in terms of like maybe their ion weaponry loadout. Their drones can sometimes be a little tedious to deal with, and of course they don't have any like superior like events to something like the Civilian controlled and whatnot. Like it's basically the exact same pool, just more NG themed, if you get what I'm saying. So of course all the NG sectors, controlled and unique sectors, have the link beacon, and obviously besides going to the ancient recovery site, you can go there to fight like a Harmony vessel, a Separatist, or a Caesarian if you care to. So I think overall Harmony is definitely not bad at all. I think it's actually quite good to go to, but there are some situations where I could see Harmony being a little sketchy. Overall, though, I'd say in the vast majority of runs, especially if you're going to be boarding, and the NGs are not too hard to kill off. And the sector is quite rewarding as well, so definitely very nice. Not quite A tier material because it's not that consistent, but it's definitely fine. It's good at what it's meant to be. Spectral sector, though, it's basically just a Dynasty version of a Vagabond sector. Dynasty vessels are more rewarding to kill, obviously, but Dynasty vessels are also a bit more dangerous. The stores can be interesting in Dynasty as well, because Dynasty stores can very often have some good combat augments. Of course, there's opportunity for ghost boarding if you care to run that. And It's a nebula sector, so on average you get a few more beacons to explore and take fights with. Not bad, obviously, but just not really good either. It's pretty close to just Vagabond. Leech control, though, is easily amazing sector to visit. Leeches just suck as enemies, like in terms like they're weak. They are very easy to kill leeches, and there's a lot of good fights and events to be had inside a leech sector. For example, the leech god basically never rolls any kind of auxiliary systems besides like the elite leech, the ampries. But you know, for leech control, you're not going to be seeing too many ampries. They drop flak weaponry, and the most tanky crew are just regular rocks. Leeches are just 90 HP crew that have no other benefit besides draining power, and rock crew are really not. They aren't offensively strong. They're just tanky. You can very easily get a lot of scrap and a lot of scaling potential off leech sectors. In addition to leech sectors really just having no bad events, there's a lot of good events like where you just kill leeches, you just raid outposts, you just troll leeches a lot. So really good sector overall. Not a lot of dangerous encounters, and basically just strictly good rewards across the board. It is very nice. In addition to being a sales sector too, so potentially game winning or game saving if you need the stores. Mining sector though is probably just another good sector. When you visit a mining sector, it always gives you immediate fleet delay, and the god can sometimes be pretty easy to kill. Sometimes it might be difficult if it's like a coalition or a Zoltan vessel or a god, but most of the time mining sectors are just really nice. Asteroids can sometimes be a little annoying as a hazard, but asteroids are not by any means the most dangerous hazard at all. Like, they aren't like pulsars or solar flares. Asteroids are just, you know, when you're fighting an asteroid field, asteroids are just another projectile. That's really all it boils down to. And there's a lot of fights to be had inside mining sectors because of the amount of asteroid belts. Virtually every single asteroid belt is a fight. So, you know, just the innate increase of asteroid belts inside the sector will also translate to just more fights, more scrap to be had in general, if you get my gist on that. Stores aren't too much worse than anything else we've seen before. You know, same potential. It's just a really fine sector overall. Like, I don't think it's quite A tier because it's not like the single most rewarding sector, but it's still just fine to go to. Uncharted though is probably like a C or B-ish tier. I'll put C tier just because Uncharted with long range scanners is some kind of sector sector revealing augment ability. It can be fine then because obviously you can always plan the jumps out to beat the exit. But Uncharted without the long range scanners can often be very empty. Uncharted is more or less, besides the fact it's Uncharted and there's no like or race or faction specific like alliance inside Uncharted, it's basically just an okay sector overall. It can be dangerous, but it also might not be dangerous at all. You might just get a lot of easy fights. I will say though, there's a couple like really outlier goated events inside Uncharted. For example, the one I talked about with the abandoned sector, where you the distress beacon, where you just say, hey, yeah, we'll track down this like drop ship you speak of. You meet up with the ship, and it's like an enemy. You kill the enemy, and then you get like a double reward with like an augment or some kind of equipment. And obviously, the other things like fights can maybe be easy at times too. Anyway, between like maybe you're fighting humans, you're fighting NGs, whatever the fuck you find in Uncharted. And in general, Uncharted is not like, oh boy, like we're fighting elites. Like you're not gonna be. It's fine to visit Uncharted. Separatist Control is probably like an A-ish, B-tier ship. Not ship, sector rather. It's pretty on par with Harmony, but considering Separatists are very often easy to kill, just in general, like even if like your gunship potential sucks, you can still crew kill Separatist ships because, you know, there's only like 1 or 2 crew to deal with, right? Separatists also have pretty much the exact same event layout as something like a Harmony. There's some good outlier events, though. Things like the Murderbot Dispersal. The Link can sometimes be very goated as well. Separatist stores are just, you know, generic stores can also be really nice as well. Overall, there's just not a lot of faults inside Separatist sectors. It's just really good. Separatist ships are not very beefy either by any means, and you're mostly going to be fighting a lot of Harmony, a lot of separatists, and maybe like a few other outlier like pirates or whatever. Overall, just a really nice sector to go to. Zoltan Control though is probably on par with Dustbringer. I'm gonna put it in detail, but just for the sake of like this video, Zoltan is a better sector than a Dustbringer. Zoltan Controlled can be very, very dangerous. Besides the fact that it's Zoltan shielded ships, and Zoltan ships sometimes have good array of systems rather. Zoltans just don't have a lot of good events in their sector. Like the Zoltan Nebulas are basically just obsolete in terms of event layouts, event makeout. Stores can sometimes be very unrewarding. Obviously, I don't like. There's no real good data point to say, oh, this store is obviously going to be better than this store, but because stores are randomized. But it's every time every time I'm like making my way through a Zoltan sector, I just feel like I'm always like behind in that sector, unless I'm like somehow like a god ship already. But in terms of like scaling up from the early game into like the mid or even late game, you can notice Zoltan sectors can sometimes put you behind. And there's a couple of reasons for that besides the dangerous fights. Zoltans can sometimes be empty. The Zoltan events can sometimes just suck in payout, and overall like when you compare like the jump potential from Zoltan sectors compared to something like like the A tier sectors, Zoltan sectors are just really annoying at times. Like you go to a Zoltan sector expecting it to be like all right, and it just turns out to be like, wow, I got like 200 scrap from this sector, great, but not a death sentence to go to, not like Dustbringer, of course, but it's just not a really nice sector to go to all the time. I guess the one thing though is that if you are somehow looking for specifically Zoltan crew, I don't know why, but for some reason the Zoltan crew drops inside Zoltan Control can be absurd at times. But besides that, like for just winning the run, I just don't see Zoltan Control being that great. It's just not that goated. Orchid sector though is definitely a very nice, comfortable B tier sector. Orchids were probably beefed up. Not even probably. They really were beefed up a lot from 5.3. Orchid ships as enemies, they don't really play around a lot. They can have a lot of good system combinations, and of course kernels are just really annoying to deal with. They can be lethal and lethally annoying at that. But if you can deal with orchid ships as different kinds of orchid ship offenses, you can kill them kind of easily because orchids aren't the single most like tanky strong crew of all time. They're good, obviously. They're really good. But in terms of like how the enemy AI uses orchids, sometimes they use orchids to fight like 4-tile, 3-tile fires, and obviously like the enemy AI is just dumb. So orchids are not super tedious to kill most of the time. They can be strong, but they aren't like just bad to kill, if you get what I'm saying. And obviously the kernel weapon drops from like stores or just from killing orchids can be very nice as well. Kernel weapons are obviously broken. They're just flat out broken. And orchid sectors can get you a lot of that. I will say though that the orchid distress events are actually kind of bad. I don't know why specifically, but distresses inside orchid sectors can be kind of bad. Between like man-eating weeds or just like abandoned like orchid scout or whatever else is going on, there can sometimes be a lot of like irreversible or just empty, like outright just dangerous distress beacons inside orchid sectors. But in terms of generic fights and like stores you can visit, orchid sectors are definitely not bad. It can be dangerous, but it's still good. Like, there's a lot of good rewards and scrap and equipment to have inside an orchid sector. Vampweed is surprisingly very, very powerful though. I almost consider this S tier if the fact that the Confederate core worlds didn't exist. The Vampweed controlled is interesting at times. It's basically Vampweeds are almost an inverse of orchids in terms of like how you approach them. Vampweeds can be very tedious to crew kill, but hull killing them is often not too bad. Vampweed ships don't have that many system combinations. Like for example, their crew drones can sometimes be a little tedious to deal with, and spore launchers can obviously be kind of bad at times too. But the amount of scrap and just overall versatility of like stores and reward drops from a Vampire sector, it's really, really nice to be able to capitalize off a good Vampire sector. It's pretty close to like this. It's a really similar dynamic to like the Elite sector in terms of like the way you're gonna be taking fights. It's just really rewarding. Vampires can sometimes be a little strong, but overall it's not like something crazy where like you gotta be like very specifically good at killing vampires, otherwise don't go to the sector. Like, you can be fine at you can be like okay or even a little bad at crew killing or just killing vampires, and vampire sectors can still be very nice. I haven't done an analysis on every single event inside a vampire sector, but from the ones I just saw, like from just playing like, I don't know, like 8 different runs and whatnot, well, I played more than 8 runs obviously, but when I did go to the vampire sector, I was very pleased every time I went there. So I do not see how I don't see this sector being any worse than B tier for that matter. In addition to vampire sectors being very dedicated to fighting a lot of vampires, there aren't a lot of like pirate engagements in vampire sectors. Free Mantis is yet again another good, pretty solid allied sector. Free Mantis is probably like yet again another inverse of Orchid sectors. Instead of like dealing with strong ships, you'll deal with a lot of strong crew, like a lot of strong crew. Obviously, Free Mantis do not fuck around at all. Like they might be derpy, they might not know what they're talking about all the time because they're duped up on pheromones. But Free Mantis with 2.2 times combat damage, their numbers, their medical systems, their just overall ship layouts at times, it can be very dangerous. Free Mantis sectors can sometimes be super lethal. But if you are prepared, and you do know what you're doing, and maybe if it's early enough in the run where you aren't dealing with like 4 Free Mantis boarders at a time, the Free Mantis sector can be super rewarding in drops and whatnot. There's a lot of good events inside Free Mantis sectors, and obviously you can gain Free Mantis crew for your boarding, and Free Mantis are literally S tier crew that can perform throughout an entire damn run. So Free Mantis sectors overall, dangerous fights and sometimes bad layouts in terms of events, but the reward potential is on par with like Civilian. Only reason why it's not A tier is because it can be lethal. That's really it. Crystal sectors though are probably another B tier-ish, A tier-ish. I'll put B tier just because it can be yet again dangerous. Crystal ships are it's interesting because sometimes crystal ships can be very, very weak, and other times it can be just so ridiculously strong it's not even funny. In general, crystal weapons are a little annoying to deal with, and crystal weapons in the early game, because of the shield pierce, they can be a little like just offensively like intimidating. But if you know what you're doing between just killing crystals off, maybe even like boarding and killing them for extra rewards, still a very nice sector overall. Crystal sectors have a lot of good fight potential. The stores aren't like hidden, or like stores aren't too rare at all. Of course, crystal weaponry is very abundant overall. Funny enough, crystals are like not like the only faction, of course, but crystals are they're one of the only sectors in the factions throughout the entire game where they have like an increased drop rate for like their weaponry. What I mean by this is like crew killing a crystal ship is like a 33% chance of giving you a crystal weapon of some kind. And that's for a generic event, so of course. Sometimes if it's like a scripted event where you aren't always going to get a weapon from, obviously things change there, but it's not hard to get a lot of scrap from crystal sectors at all. Like it's quite easy to go through and just slaughter. Crystals also don't have really good system combinations as well. They obviously can have cloaking, they can have mind control, and teleporting can sometimes be kind of tedious if you aren't very good at anti-boarding in terms of like your crew's strength. But considering that they aren't like slugs by any means, and they aren't like strictly lethal, I consider like an early game crystal sector can be very scaly. Like it can be nice. Scaly in the sense of like scaling off a crystal sector. And then last but not least, for the generic sectors, we have Outcast. Probably the only S tier sector in terms of generic. I would consider it A tier, but considering that Outcasts are just like Outcasts can sometimes be lethal, really dangerous. But if you're prepared to fight like the separatist equivalent of rock crew, you can just get exquisite rewards from this sector. Between Federation outposts, distress beacons for the outcasts, and just overall fighting outcast ships, they really like they can sometimes have good layouts for like offenses and whatnot, but if you're prepared, it's just such a good sector overall. I think mainly the two events that you're gonna like really want to visit are one where it's like some kind of like tie or some kind of like fight, like a mob between a outcasts and slavers. If you aid the outcasts and kill the slavers, you'll get a double reward, one from killing the slaver and another one from like high scrap plus some kind of equipment. It's just really powerful of a sector. You can scale tremendously up an outcast sector. It's actually probably so good, it might be like a risk your life kind of thing for it. Because even though it's like, okay, like even, let's say like in a circumstance where like you really suck at killing outcasts for whatever reason, like maybe like your boarding team just isn't good yet, or maybe like even as a gunship you kind of struggle too. The store potential and just overall scrap potential on outcast can literally catapult you into like flagship ready by the end of the sector. Like I've had runs before where I entered the outcast sector with like only like my basic systems, and I leave the sector with like cloaking, hacking, and like teleporter, some crazy shit. Like outcasts just are so generous in their reward drops. It's crazy. So at this point, this pretty much concludes the generic sectors for Multiverse. And up next we have the unique sectors. As I look through the generic sectors, I think this looks pretty solid. Obviously, there's no F tier damn sectors throughout really a lot of the game, but for this, it's like for my purposes, I think the generic sectors are ranked well enough according to how they perform in scrap, how they perform in events, how lethal, how dangerous they are. Overall, just I think I'm fine with where they're at now. So, without further ado, I guess we move on to the unique sectors. The Multiverse Drop Points is a very interesting sector at times. Ironically enough, the Multiverse Drop Point was changed a lot between 5.3 and 5.4 in terms of events and what you're looking for. I think in total, though, for the Multiverse Drop Point, there's probably like 4 or 5 beacons you really want to visit every time. That's between the supplies and probably Kira, although you can make an argument for wanting to visit Sylvan a lot. There's some really good events as well. There's 2 good events I always really like to visit. One of them being a free Mantis Scout, which if you kill him or accept his surrender, you can get a free Mantis crew or a good reward. And then there's the other event where I think it's an Airgon or Airigon, whatever the pirate faction's name is called. It has no weapons. It has pretty much no offense outside of a teleporter and maybe drone control. You can, if you crew kill it or even hull kill it if you want to, it gives you a weapon drop or a drone drop almost every single time ever. And it can run away kind of fast, but if you're prepared to actually kill it, it can be very, very like scaly based just off that weapon alone. Because you never know, it might be some goated shit like a good weapon, And considering that the event really will just never kill you, the pirate will just run away if you can't complete the fight. It's just such a good event to always visit inside the drop point. The drop point also cannot have Zoltan shields or crystal weaponry or renegades or any kind of elaborately very dangerous enemy. The most dangerous enemies you'll fight are just MV rebels with drone control and like heavy lasers. Obviously that's pretty intimidating at times, but overall I'm not going to be like saying the drop point's a bad sector, because like granted it's the only damn sector you start in. Like every run you ever play starts in the drop point, so you better know what you're going for inside the drop point. But all things considered, if you know what you're doing and you don't get the most horrendous luck ever, it's definitely a good sector to scale off of. Like unironically, like obviously it's the only sector you can scale off of at the beginning of your game, but it's still like it's still good. Separatist Unique though is just on par with regular Separatist Controlled. It's pretty much the identical events, but there's a few changes. For example, like the mine layer inside a Separatist Unique. the Separatist transport loot, and then of course the link gives you 100% chance for the Ancient Orbiter. But otherwise, the events are almost identical. It's just another It's just another Separatist sector on the map. So obviously, really good. Confederate Core Worlds though is like probably on par with the Ancient Recovery site. I don't know like what the hell happened between playtesting and like just killing off, like wanting to kill off vamp breeds, or just wanting to include vamp breeds in the lore. But someone massively overlooked the drop rewards and the drop rates of spore weaponry, elite spore weaponry, and just scrap potential from the Confederate Core Worlds. Like, I don't know who it was that was tasked with like playing through the Confederate Core Worlds, but like holy fuck, this is literally like a almost a 2,000 scrap sector at times. It's like the event can be just so rewarding. The only real drawback I could ever see with the Confederate Core Worlds is sometimes cultivator vessels can be a little tedious to deal with. And that's really only because cultivators are strong. Everywhere else, it's basically just fighting vamp breeds all over again. The unlock events, or just the the unique events inside the Core Worlds for like unlocking the cultivator, the Catalan, and the regular Confederate cruisers, all of those unlock quests are just really straightforward, and they have very good rewards. The sector overall just has no real drawback besides just maybe sometimes a dangerous fight, but the scrap potential from a good Confederate Core Worlds is just like, wow, like what the hell? How could this possibly get past playtesting at times, you know? I'm definitely not going to be surprised if Confederate Core Worlds gets like a heavy ass nerf. The only reason why it's not like literally game breaking at times is because spore weaponry isn't the most goated weaponry you could ever use. It's very good, but it's not like game winning all the time, if you get what I'm saying. It's just a lot of scrap to be had. So, in any case, it's just such a good sector to go to. Rebel Stronghold, though, back into the hostile uniques. It's probably the same as a regular Rebel controlled. The Rebels are going to be beefier. Obviously, you can fight MFK aces more often than not. But the Rebel flagship construction event is across the game. It's the one single most rewarding event of all time, pretty much. In of itself, only if you consider one event across any sector ever, it would be the Rebel construction event being the most just abundantly like rich and wealthy. That's pretty much the only beacon of like of interest though inside the Rebel Stronghold. I guess if you have Jerry on board, you can collect some funny MFK aces, or if maybe, I don't know, you want to go to the Jerome sector. But outside of that, it's really just the same thing as a Rebel controlled. It's same amount of stores, pretty much. I think 2 to 3, maybe sometimes 4 if you get like a lucky store distress beacon. And then yeah, obviously MFK aces can sometimes be a little challenging, but I think the one advantage the Rebel Stronghold has is that surprisingly it has a lot of elite Rebel encounters. And elite rebels will always give you some kind of good weapon to get from them, like something like Hermes, Berserker 2, Heavy 2, Halberd, whatever the loot pool is for them. But yeah, it's still a good sector, not bad to go to Rebel Stronghold. It can be a little bad sometimes if like the fleet boost from visiting the sector gets in the way, or something crazy like that happens. But in any case, it's still a plenty good sector to go to. The black market though is probably like a C-ish, B-ish tier. I'll put B tier because it's not strictly worse than pirate controlled. The black market can sometimes be a little dangerous because there's even more tankier pirates, and the main beacon of interest inside the black market isn't like that interesting. Funny enough, it's actually just not that great across the board. But if you know what you're doing and you are prepared for like killing a bunch of pirates, the black market isn't too bad. Hive Brood World though is like pretty similar to a Mantis sector. I'm gonna put it in. I'll put it in C tier as well, just because the event pool is almost identical to the Mantis controlled. I will say though that the Bishop quest, or the Suzerain quest for that matter, can be quite good as well. Obviously having a Bishop on board for like kind of boarding is yeah, it's pretty lethal at times. But overall, I wouldn't say this is like go to the Hive Brood Worlds just for the sake of being Mantis boarding. Like, it's obviously still an okay sector to go to at times, and the scrap isn't any worse than like something like a other kind of unique sector would have, the average unique sector at least. But the fights can be dangerous at times. Bishops don't play around. Repair drones, maintenance drones, defense drones, just drones in general can sometimes be very tedious to deal with. And bishops are just, and Caesareans are just objectively really powerful elites. Crew kill potential is still kind of good to have inside the Brood Worlds, but I don't know, like it's not bad to go to Brood Worlds, if you get what I'm saying. Up next we have the Thurocracy Homeworld. It's probably another like C-tier-ish event, C-tier-ish sector. Pretty much identical to the rock controlled mine, not minus, but rather in addition to the what's it called, like the rock citadel, the rock homeworld event, whatever that is, like where you fight Stonewall. Well, you don't fight Stonewall, but you assassinate Stonewall. Just otherwise, just identical sector to regular rock controlled. The Hermes loot might be like goated at times, but overall, I'm not gonna go to Thurocracy Homeworld just for the sake of fighting fucking rocks. You know, it's not like there's no advantage to going to Thurocracy Homeworlds over something like, I don't know, Rebel Stronghold for that matter. Imperial New Homeworlds though is definitely a really nice unique sector. I would consider it A tier, but Sentinel vessels can sometimes be very, very powerful in terms of the crystal weaponry, like the elite crystals and whatnot. I'll put it B tier for now though, because it's objectively not as a bad sector. It just can be very dangerous. The Imperial New Homeworlds events they aren't any different than like something like the crystal sectors would be at times. The Danish quest, or just the beacon of interest inside the new homeworlds, it's pretty good overall, and obviously the unique crew from that is really nice at times. And the overall just rewards and drop rates of just crystal weaponry and scrap across the board in the sector isn't bad either. It's just a fine sector. It can be dangerous, but I don't know, it's fine. I probably over-exaggerated the dangerous part a little bit too much, but I've seen Sentinel vessels be on par with like something like Lanius warships. Like it gets crazy sometimes. So, anyways, up next we have the Lost Stronghold. Just honestly, it's really not that much more different than the Thurocracy Homeworlds in terms of like just events or ways you're gonna take on the sector. Lost Suns can obviously be kind of dangerous at times because Lost Suns are just rock crew that spawn fires. And obviously if you're not prepared for fires and a lot of fire, you can be, yeah, Lost Suns sometimes don't play around. But there's some good events inside the Lost Sun sectors. I think what's the one event called? The one where you get the war hero. I forgot what her name is. Ariande, I think. But that event is also really good. The store potential isn't too bad. It's overall not a bad sector. It's just not very like exquisite or very like intriguing to always go to Lost Sun Stronghold. It's just a fine sector. Overall, a fine sector. Up next is the Dustbringer Capital, though. I'll put it C tier just because the rewards are better. Really, it's just now it's still very dangerous at times, but hey, at least the events are better. The beacon of interest can be very nice inside the Dustbringer Stronghold. It's two different uniques from basically one event. Well, it's multiple events, but it's like this. It's a quest line. You get two uniques from the same damn quest line, and rewards can sometimes be very nice inside Dustbringer in the Dustbringer Capital. Otherwise, it's just an okay ship. It's sector. More rewarding, but same lethality as Dustbringer Controlled, but obviously more rewarding just means better, so. The Central Shipyard is probably on par with just a regular automated sector, you know, just with auto ships and whatnot. There's a couple interesting events to have there between the engineer mothership like blowing up, or the asshole if you care to see him, but overall just a fine. Like it's just average sector. Auto ships can still be tedious to fight, but there can be some good events inside the central shipyards if you care for like the specific ones where you get like maybe transport loot if you want, or anything like that. Or hey, my favorite sector. Anyways, moving on from the central shipyards, we have the civilian core worlds. Civilian core worlds is just pretty close to regular civilian controlled. I think honestly, in my honest opinion, it might be like a tad bit worse. But in terms of like the beacon of interest and the fact that you can get like the spider reroute from there. You can also get the spider reroute from the regular civilian controlled sector, of course. But civilian core worlds is the guaranteed, and as well as just not being any more dangerous of a sector than a regular civilian controlled. The rewards are a slightly bit worse at times, but considering it's otherwise just a civilian controlled with just slightly different dialogue and slightly harder fights, I'm not gonna consider it like way like a whole tier like worse than it's controlled, its generic counterpart. Lane Swarmlands though is probably one of my honestly favorite sectors to go to at times, but I see why it can be so dangerous. Where did I put it? Here it is. I'll put A tier for the sake of the tier list. Lane Swarmlands might be the single most dangerous sector you can visit in the late game. Lanius warships, elite and non-elite, can be so stacked. It is crazy how stacked these Lanius ships can be sometimes. Like it's on par with slug elites. They are basically capable of running any system besides drone control. Lanius boarding stinks, and the events inside the Lanius Swarmlands can be sometimes lethal too. Like if you pick the fight with the wrong elite vessel, oh boy, it can be challenging. But the saving grace for it being an A tier is the scrap potential. The scrap potential from the Swarmlands is so high. It is really, really high to get not high, but really likely to get a high amount of scrap from the sector overall. It's elite. There's quite a few elites you can fight inside the Swarmlands between just the elite Lanius or just elite slug or whatever else you find there. The beacon of interest inside the Swarmlands is also really nice. The Beacon Eater quest is good by all means. Even if you don't take the guy with the beacon pots, it's still a really good event. Overall, just a good sector. I probably could put it in B tier, and it might be the better choice, but Swarmland, if you're prepared for the Swarmlands, it's a good sector. It's just a really good sector to profit off of. The hacker sector is probably like a B-ish tier. It's a good scrap fueled sector, but the hacker vessels are just, they can be dangerous at times too. Hacker vessels are just slug ships with hacking guaranteed on all the loadouts. That's just it. Otherwise, they have the exact same like slug composition of crew. The broadcasting stations can be good to fight to get the beacon of interest. The hacker cruiser unlock could be very nice at times. I think the one big downside is like the stores are quite rare. In fact, inside the hacker sector, I'm pretty sure there's like 3 stores total, and 2 of them can be in fights. One of them is a fight, and the other one is like not always going to be a store. So in any case, it's still a plenty good sector if you're ready for it. The hacker sector does also have good events as well. There's some events where you get like fleet delay or like just really high scrap from saving people from the hackers. The hacker sector by lore is just a civilian sector that got overran by the hacker clan. That's just it. Moving on will be the slug capital, which would probably be I'll put C tier. I don't know. Like, the slug capital isn't bad by any means. It's just like another slug control. It's actually got very similar events. I think the 2 most prominent beacons of interest though would be the Sylvan quest for the pre-igniter, as well as the reroute to the Royal Nebula by talking to Slutnog, talking to the whatever the fuck the faction's called. The Clairvoyance, that's right. You've talked to the Clairvoyant Dreadnought that's like abandoned, but in any case, still like it's not a bad sector. It can just be not very rewarding at times. The drop rates can be fine. Obviously, the pre-igniter is a pre-igniter, but from there, I don't know. It's just an okay sector. Not bad, just not amazing either. Guild territory though is definitely an A tier sector. A lot of good fights to be had. A lot of good events to be had with double rewards or just killing elites. A lot of elites can spawn inside the guild territory between Caesarians, Radiates, Knights of Knights, and just overall a lot of different kinds of vessels you can fight. Scrap potential is good. Stores are pretty abundant most of the time, and obviously the beacon when you go to the guild territory isn't locked. Like, it isn't a guaranteed hostile encounter. So overall, a good sector, good scrap potential. Plus the clan loot laser is the clan loot rad laser is kind of goated. The shell homeworlds, the Geography core worlds, probably like C or B. By the way, did I forget a damn shell sector in my generic sectors? Oh wow, I did. Huh. Well, shells would rank about B tier anyway. But in any case, the central shell nebula is like, I don't know. Shell vessels aren't the most fun things to fight ever. And the rewards aren't like strictly better than just the generic controlled shell sectors. Well, I really can't believe I missed out on the shell sector, really. Yeah, it's not down here, so, huh, oh well. In any case, there's a couple good beacons of interest. The one being like the unlock quest, if you save the radiance from the stealth cruiser. Besides that, though, it's okay sector, just okay. The shell science is like a super good sector, though. There's a few things that play into it besides the fact that morphs are kind of weak and just good to farm off of. The good events inside the shell science sector, or the center rather, they're all globally displayed on the map as like I forget what it's called. It's like beacon alpha or like something delta, marker delta, marker beta, whatever the hell it's called. But there's guaranteed new gen, guaranteed aether tech inside the sector. Ooj's quest can be very rewarding at times if you want to capitalize off Ooj. And overall, just morph ships aren't the most strong things of all time. So, obviously morph crew aren't very amazing. And the way enemies use morph crew, they aren't amazing. They're pretty easy to kill, so. Moving on from there. Spectral Wastelands is probably like a B tier-ish sector. It's interesting because it's very close to a Vagabond sector, but there are 3 ruins events outside of the nebula. 3 white beacons, empty beacons, outside of the nebula. Not guaranteed Aether Tech. I think it's a 2 in 7, or maybe a 3 in 7 chance to get Aether Tech. But besides that, it's still a fine sector to visit. The event for the Ghostbusters can be very rewarding as well if you want to capitalize off like thousands of scrap, but not thousands, god no, hundreds, sorry, not thousands, not thousands at all. But you know, the event is quite good. Only real downside I see for the sector is just the scrap potential. If you don't get good ruins outcomes, and you don't happen to find the Ghostbuster quest, the Vagabonds aren't very amazing to kill in terms of drops. Like low scrap, medium scrap at the most. So still a fine sector, just sometimes can be a little unrewarding. Sometimes, not all the time. Up next we got the Spectral Capital, which is just another like C-ish, maybe like low B tier, but I'll just put C tier because there's compared to the other unique sectors you can visit, the Spectral Capital is just not one you're gonna always want to go to. Overall, the scrap potential isn't too bad, but Dynasty's ships are not always fun to fight. Ghost ships they aren't stacked by any means, but they aren't really like, I don't know, they aren't like completely safe to fight either. It's not like fighting leeches, they can be strong. There's no real like absolute pinnacle good events inside the Spectral Capital besides maybe getting Odysseus, where you fight like a big auto like Dreadnought, and then you get the guy. Overall, just nothing super amazing. It's a good sector for getting fights, but besides just picking fights with Ghost, there's nothing exquisite about it. There's nothing that puts it ahead of like these other unique sectors. So the Leech Republic, though, the Leech unique, definitely it's a Leech controlled sector that just has better events, like even better events, with fighting Amperies, with the unique events to save Tudro or the other guy. I forgot what his name is, but the revolutionary leech. A lot of scrap to be had there. Leeches are just easy to kill, of course, and coalition are sometimes there as well, but coalition are also fun to kill. So overall, amazing set to go to. Coalition Stronghold is probably like on par with the Brood Worlds. I will put it higher though, because the in this Coalition Stronghold, if you find Kazakh, you can then go to the Hive Brood World. So it's not like you're going in the same sector twice. But the Coalition Stronghold is it's still good. It's same logic as a regular Coalition controlled. There's a lot of Coalition fights to be had, but Coalition vessels can be sometimes stacked. That's really all it revolves around. So that's all it revolves around. Sorry. Good scrap potential, good events. There's a lot of good events rather. There's the transport loot, there's Kazakh, and there's the terraformer or chloroformer, whatever the hell the ship's called. We can get Carnage missiles if you care to visit it. Overall, just a good sector. Militia encampment though is like probably just like a B-ish tier. It's definitely like it's really on par with a regular civilian sector, but it's got some slightly worse events. And the beacons of interest inside the militia encampment aren't very interesting. Besides, I guess if you want to get Haines, like specifically Haines, I guess like it's pretty easy to get them most of the time. But you know, otherwise it's I don't know. It's okay. It's a good sector. It's not bad. The scrap potential is fine. Stores layout is all right too. Just sometimes they're a little underwhelming in like scrap potential. That's really it. The Monk Refuge is just okay sector. The only reason why the Monk Refuge ever really stands out is because of the Zoltan Peace Envoy quest, and that's it. Like there's literally nothing else about the Monk Refuge that matters at all. It can be empty at times, very unrewarding in scrap, but I suppose if you do want to get the peace ending or you do really want Zoltan shields, I guess it's pretty easy to find all that, but besides that, like, I don't know, it can be an empty sector at times, and that's just bad. Not lethal, but empty is not that much better anyway. There are times where, like, empty sectors are just just worse than, like, lethal sectors, if you catch my drift. Up next, the Harmony Core Worlds, just another S tier, you know, unique. Besides the fact it's a perfect gateway into the damn ancient recovery site. The only real danger part of the Core Worlds is the Harmony God. That's it. Like the really only danger you'll ever face in the Core Worlds is the Harmony God, the god you see when you get there. Besides that, events are exquisite. The scrap potential is huge. Harmony vessels are surprisingly not that much more dangerous than something like the regular NG vessels can be. Just overall an amazing sector to visit at times. Zoltan's capital is probably like average to D-ish. It might be the only unique sector that's in like D tier, but I think just for the sake of it being a unique sector, of it being like pretty much strictly better than its generic counterpart, I'll put it in C tier just because the events aren't any worse. Some engagements can be better, like the example the Zoltan capital quest can be good at times, and of course there's sometimes the Zoltan crew can be goated if you are looking for them. Otherwise, just okay sector. Scrap potential is okay, but the fights are still just as dangerous. Because, I don't know, like, last I checked, peacekeeping vessels are still quite stacked, so. Up next, we got the Gathering Garner Worlds, yet another S tier unique sector. Yet again, of course, orchids were quite beefed, especially Orchid elites of all things. Yeah, they don't mess around either, but the rewards you can get from getting a bunch of elite kernels and just kernel weaponry in general, the quest to go to the Gardenins and get Mayeb and the other unique, not unique, but elite weaponry and such. It's just overall really powerful, good scaling sector. The only real danger part is orchid ships, and if you're prepared, well, you're prepared, and that's it. End of story. Just an amazing sector overall. The hunting grounds is probably just on par with the regular Free Mantis sector. it might be slightly better, but I think overall, in terms of like winning the run based off of going to the hunting grounds, it's not that much more scaly than something like the scaly in terms of like scaling off of anything more than like the free mantis sector. You're gonna have a good time if you can kill off free mantis pretty easily, and obviously the getting Freddy is really nice as well. But besides those few good events, there's nothing that's like strictly just wow, let's always go to the hunting grounds. Good sector, good scrap potential, just not like an always let's go there every single time. Federation control though is definitely like almost an S tier. I think this is like the this is sorry, damn, my throat. Oh my god, what the hell just happened? Jesus, okay. Anyways, the Federation controlled the Federation sector, it's a unique sector, is probably the highest ranking A tier sector because of just overall the events inside of it. There's a lot of good encounters to have. I think there's the three main ones you're always going to want to visit is a ship distress, where it talks about like I forgot what it is, but it's like a new order cruiser. If you talk through a bunch of dialogue, you get a free peacekeeper, a combat augment, and a bunch of scrap. Obviously, just an amazing event for just clicking through text walls. The memorial event is obviously good for just MFK. The MFK gunboat isn't often. It's the same exact gunboat every single time. The layout is exactly the same, pretty much, minus maybe the system levels. But besides that, it's pretty much the exact same the event every time. Dual wielding heavy twos can be very high in DPS. Like they're probably one of the highest DPS laser setups you can have. And there's a lot of scrap to be had inside Federation controlled. I think the only reason why I might not put in S tier is because sometimes encounters can be kind of bad. The Federation controlled very often has 2 or 3 renegades running around, like 2 to 3 different multiverse renegades running around. So if you meet this sector in like the early game, like sector 4, like right in the dot, it can be a little stressful. But if you're prepared, you're prepared, and it's gonna be just fine. Really good sector to scale off of. Falcon Badlands though is on par with Ancient Recovery Site. It's yet again another 2,000 scrap sector. It's probably like I don't know. It's probably one of the best sectors of all time too. I'm not gonna put it like in a category of like Ancient Recovery Site by any means, because it's not always game breaking, but the scrap potential between going to the Crystalline Origins, as well as just killing a bunch of outcasts and getting a lot of good events through the outcast beacons. It's just so good. It's an outcast sector, but even better. So that's all it really boils down to. Infested sector though is probably like C-ish, B-ish. I'll put it like in B tier because the spiders aren't too hard to kill. The infected sector is a reroute you get after successfully killing off a space station that was infested with giant alien spiders inside civilian sectors. Overall, it's nothing crazy of a sector in terms of like events that could win you the run, but the Queen can be a really good asset at times. There's a lot of fights to be had, and Sylvan is there as well if you want to do stuff with him. Overall, a good sector to go to, especially if it being a reroute. The one with innovations is probably another B tier. The one with innovations can be situational at times in terms of if you actually benefit off of like power core, or if you really benefit off of any kind of like auto ship drops you can get from there. But the stores can be nice, and the fights aren't too bad, and the events are almost always straightforward. So overall, nothing like crazy where like you have to like really like lock in and focus up on trying to capitalize off the sector. It's really straightforward, and you're not gonna have a bad time going to this sector. At least if you're prepared, of course. Sometimes the innovative auto ships can be a little challenging because of the system loadout. Of course, they have breach sealant, so you can't soft lock the auto ships. But overall, still it's a fine reroute, especially if you can capitalize off power core. Up next is the Jerome. Whatever the hell this word is. It's an interesting, another good sector, I would say. It's probably not like the best unique sector you could, secret sector you could always visit. But to get Drome and to maybe capitalize off killing a bunch of rebels, it can be alright. It's just a good scrap field sector. It's not too dangerous. It's just uncommon to get to there because of the way it generates on your runs. You know, only way you can ever get there is by killing that MFK ace within the time limit of the transport, hyper jumping away, and whatever else. But besides that, still a good sector. The Royal Nebula is probably another really good unique to go. Reroute to go to. You get this by talking to the clairvoyant, like ruined dreadnought. You give the guy like 50 scrap and you get the reroute. But in any case, really good sector overall. Knighted vessels can sometimes be a little dangerous, but overall it's nothing too bad. It's definitely much better than like a regular slug capital or slug controlled would be. And sometimes the events can be really nice as well. There's a good amount of stores inside the Royal Nebula, and just overall, there's nothing there's not that many drawbacks about the the Slug Nebula. It's just good overall. And up next, we have the ancient recovery sites. Might as well put this in the highest tier I possibly can. This is the game-breaking sector of the game. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It is literally game-breaking. It's almost a 3,000 scrap sector. The ancient recovery site alone is almost a 3,000 scrap sector in of itself. So where do we begin with this? I guess we can start off with just the way that you visit the sector. You visit the sector by going through the link and going talking to Crunchmeister, and then he reroutes you there. When you go to Crunchmaster, he immediately reroutes you there. So wherever sector you're in, basically gets voided if it is voided. Oftentimes you can visit the quest at like the last market possible and then go, but in most cases it'll be like an instant reroute. Well, it is instant reroute, but in terms of instant reroute, isn't like you lose a sector kind of thing. When you get there, the augmented guard will never be hostile. You can always talk or just leave or even trade with them. You can crew kill the guard for a payload, for a harbinger drone, or trade for a payload, or trade for like an augmented crew, maybe the augment if you care to. Obviously the big main gist of the ancient recovery site is the 3 different ruins events, which have a 1 in 4 chance of they always give you Aether Tech, but 1 in 4 chance to give you a payload. Ooh boy, payload weaponry, am I right? But amazing events across the board. Ancient Recovery Site was changed a little bit from 5.3, but in terms of like just event value, it's just so fucking overpowered. Like, it's just the Ancient Recovery Site, like, it could, like, there's gonna be a day, like, at some point, maybe like in 2 years from now, when the True Ending rework comes out, I'm not gonna be surprised if the Ancient Recovery Site is just gone from the earth. It's just the way it's situated in the game right now. Like, you can literally go any run, any quest line ever by just capitalizing off the Ancient Recovery Site. There's just, the events are exquisite. The sector is really not dangerous at all, surprisingly enough. Augmented vessels are actually kind of easy to kill at times. They have good system layouts, and obviously augmented crew are kind of spooky if they pop on your ship, but I mean, again, it's just like the earlier you go in the Ancient Recovery Site, the harder the run is going to be to lose. It's just, it's so absurdly like broken in terms of scrap. Like, it's basically a Sector 2 recovery site is a guaranteed win, almost in every single circumstance. If you can survive through the Ancient Recovery Site, you survive throughout anywhere else in the run you go. The events are just amazing across everywhere. I think the top 2 events, though, besides the ruins, would be the one where you encounter like an obelisk wreck piloted by vagabonds and ghosts, and then the other event being I think it's a tie between just the anointed exit, funny enough, and the transport loot. And besides those 2, like, the sector overall is just a lot of good fights, a lot of good elites to kill, a lot of good just drop rates. Crew killing augmented vessels yields you the same rewards as a regular like crew killing Lanius vessel in vanilla. Good thing. There's a good footnote here too, because I think I forgot to mention it for the for regular like Lanius ships and whatnot. In vanilla, Lanius ships, when you crew kill them, will give you like medium high scrap plus equipment. But in multiverse, Lanius they only give you resources and scrap. However, for the for multiverse, for the augmented recovery site, when you fight augmented, that basically the drop rates for when you crew kill augmented were like replaced with, not replaced, but were transferred basically from vanilla when you crew killed those vanilla Lanius ships. So it's pretty much when you crew kill Lanius that aren't like a scripted event or onto the ruins beacons, it'll always be high scrap plus some kind of equipment. So like an augment, weapon, drone, maybe just a lot of resources in general if you get a little bit lucky there too. It's just so much shit going on inside the ancient recovery site. It's like literally like game breaking at times. There's just no other way to put it. The crystalline origins is just another S tier whatchamacallit, sector, unique secret sector. It's basically like the normal multiverse counterpart of what the ancient recovery site provides. It's basically, instead of just grinding out payloads, you're just grinding out elite crystal weaponry. In addition to fighting cultists and just getting a whole bunch of scrap from there. On average, the crystalline origins will be your highest paying out sector in terms of scrap. And the events from killing cultists at times can be very rewarding as well. And then, of course, if you abuse the Ruin and Vortigaunt engagement at the exit beacon or just throughout the sector, you can get a lot of scrap through there too, a lot of hull repair, crystal weaponry, all kinds of crazy shit. So yeah, overall, just really good sector. Not quite SSS material, but just still really, really powerful of a sector. The Obelisk Homeworld, the Obelisk Wastelands is a sector you only visit by going the true ending path. It's probably not even that good of a sector to rank anyway, because it's a once you go true ending by activating Wither, you are locked in to go into the Wastelands. But like I don't know, it's still probably an okay sector to rank. The biggest things that you're gonna take into account when you go to the Wastelands ever, for the Obelisk Wastelands at least, are the 10 fleet delay, as well as the transport loots and just the store distress beacons as well. Obelisks aren't the craziest enemies you could ever fight, because you can fight obelisks with obelisk equipment, you know, like just you fight fire with fire basically, and often you win because your fire is, you know, it's like fighting fire with blue fire kind of situation. You're just stronger than obelisks by using obelisk technology. But in any case, it's a pretty good leeway into going to the home worlds. If you are somehow behind by going into the true ending, by going into the wastelands, you can definitely get caught up really easily by going, you know, throughout the wastelands. The 10 fleet delay, assuming the layout isn't too cancerous, you can definitely visit almost every single beacon, minus maybe like 1 or 2. And even then, like, you basically avoid all of the empty beacons and you just go for stores, you go for the fights, and that's pretty much it. Otherwise, yeah, it's a really good sector. I'd probably put like A-ish, maybe lowish S. I'll put A tier just for the sake of it being the Wastelands. The Homeworlds is pretty much on par though. It's almost the exact same events. You just kill a bunch of royals. And the royal equipment can sometimes be game winning for killing Vance and maybe killing the Dreadnought if you care. Well, you'll care. You have to kill the Dreadnought, but in any case, sometimes the royal engagements inside the damn homeworlds can be a little iffy, but if you scaled properly and you got caught up, if you needed to get caught up from the wastelands, it's definitely a really nice like final like scrap farming sector to go into the Vance fight and whatnot. Nexus is. See, this is interesting, because Nexus is honestly a sector that shouldn't really be ranked, but considering that the Nexus, when you go through a Nexus run, you basically visit the entire Nexus before visiting Prime, and considering the entire sector is at your disposal, I'll put it in S tier. The only way you're going to ever visit the Nexus is if you're prepared for the Nexus, of course, And if you're prepared for the Nexus, then you're prepared just to win the game anyway. Obviously, the Nexus has a lot of good, just broken-ass events in general. You can get the laser beam, the biatch beam, if you can use that pretty well. And the abundance of Sylvan stores. Sylvan stores have the, have basically the loot pool of every single equipment in the game, minus, like, something like ancient stuff. But you can get ancient augments, but not, like, ancient, like, you can't get payloads from the Nexus, of course. Overall, Nexus is really nice. It doesn't take that much effort to like catch up and scale into being able to kill Prime and win the run. Overall, just a really nice sector. You know, funny enough, the Nexus is basically its own quest line. You know, the secret sector of the Nexus is its own ending, but it's still a good thing to evaluate because you know it's. Killing Prime isn't always the 100% straightforward thing. Like Prime, of course, isn't the hardest enemy in Multiverse. He's not even the hardest boss, but it's you know it's a thing to sometimes consider in terms of like I don't know, like if it isn't already a straightforward win by the time you're in the Nexus. Sometimes you want to evaluate the way you approach the Nexus, where you either kill off all the Sylvans, you get laser beam, you get whatever you want, wherever floats the boat, kind of thing for Nexus. Good sector. Pretty much all the Sylvans you can meet there, like across, like I don't know, like the Capitalist Sylvan, Sand Sylvan, the Maid Sylvan. All these kinds of different events are really straightforward. The enemies aren't even hard, besides the fact that they're Sylvan. But yeah, just good sector. Besides the fact you can also if you go Nexus and you have the Wither on board still, well Wither's not on board, but he's like in your storage check. You can go true ending by after you capitalize off Nexus, and of course that's like a little broken, but anyways, from there, the last but not least, although we did miss the shell sector earlier, but you know whatever. The Hector Mega Market is just probably another like A tier-ish like unique sector. Typically, through base Multiverse gameplay, the only way you're gonna visit the Nexus is through the Hector Mega Market. But if you don't plan on Nexus running, the Hector Mega Market is still plenty good sector to go to. Globally visible stores, the events inside the Hector sector are still pretty rewarding. Lots of double rewards, and Hector's ships aren't like super lethal at times. They sometimes have good like system layout, good system combinations, but Hector borders, Hector crew are not very challenging to defeat. And it's yet again like if you do need to if you do need to scale properly and you need to like use Hector weaponry, you are allowed to do that pretty easily. Hector stores are quite they're quite guaranteed in the shit they're gonna give you. They always give you some kind of weapon for you to use. And if you are behind in one way or another, the Mega Market isn't like a death sentence to go to, especially as being a reroute. If you can't go to the Mega Market, you won't go to the Mega Market. You know, it's a reroute. It's not it's not like a locked in like you have to go here. But overall, if you are going to benefit off the Hector Mega Market, it's just a good sector to go to. Hector weaponry is also, it's on average, it's alright, but there's some combinations of stuff that can be super broken, like mod accuracy missiles with cooldown, maybe fire missiles, whatever floats the boat kind of thing. And with that final sector ranked, that's pretty much the tier list we got here. I think I missed 2 sectors in total, the shell and the the sail sector of some other one, but in any case, the shell sector, the generic shell sector would probably rank about B tier anyway. Higher than C tier because shell ships aren't too dangerous at times. System combinations can be kind of weird, but overall it's not like shells are immortal and invincible as crew, much less as a gunship, so if you're prepared for shells, you can be fine, so they can go in hypothetical B tier. And that's it for the tier list, pretty much. Good pacing, surprisingly, for doing 64 different sectors. To run down through the list, we got in SSS tier, we have the Ancient Recovery Site. In S tier, we have the Outcast Controlled, the Confederate Core Worlds, the Urgan Republic, Harmony Core Worlds, Gathering Garden Worlds, Theocracy Badlands, crystalline origins, and the nexus. I said that weird. The nexus. In A tier, we have the Federation controlled, or the Federation sector, the Civilian controlled, the Leech controlled, the Separatist controlled, the Confederate controlled, the Separatist unique, the Civilian core worlds, the Lanius Swarmlands, Guild territory, the Shell Sign Center, the Royal Nebula, the Obelisk Wastelands, Obelisk Homeworlds, and the Hector Mega Market. In B tier, we have the Rebel controlled, the Pirate controlled, with the sale and non-sale equivalents being ranked the same. Coalition controlled, Abandoned Sector, sale and not. The Harmony controlled, the Mining sectors, the Orchid controlled, the Free Mantis controlled, the Crystal controlled, the Multiverse Drum Point, the Rebel Stronghold, the Black Market, the Crystalline New Homelands, the Hacker sector, the Spectral Wastelands, Coalition Stronghold, the Militia Encampment, Hunting Grounds, Infested Sector, Wentworth Innovations, and the Jerome Protectorate. In C tier, we got the Mantis controlled, the Rock controlled, the Automated Shipyards, the Slug controlled, Sail and Not, the Vagabond controlled, the Dynasty controlled, the Uncharted Nebula, basically the Wild Card sector, Hive Brood Worlds, Rock Homeworlds, Lost Sun Stronghold, Central Shipyards, Dustbin Capital, Slug Capital, Shell Core Worlds, the Democracy Core Worlds, Spectral Capital, Monk Refuge, and the Zoltan Capital. And then lastly, in D tier, we have the Ministry controlled and the Dustbringer controlled. And that pretty much makes up the sector tier list. This is pretty much the exact format you're going to want to always follow for any time you need to go to sectors. So for example, if you're like in sector 2, you're looking at your pathing map, and you see, okay, if I go up, there are Civilian controlled versus Zoltan controlled. Oh, I wonder which one I'm going to take. And I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but this tier list is basically ranked based off the independent sectors. There's going to be so many situations in the game where there actually might sometimes be a reason to go Zoltan controlled over something like, I don't know, the Leech controlled. Granted, very rarely, of course, but I've seen situations where based off my pathing map, or just flat out maybe I need the damn Zoltans for whatever reason, I can see arguments for always sometimes going to the lower tier sectors, even despite their rewards and drop rates. Maybe the lethality is somewhat high. Overall, sometimes there's always gonna be that variability, minus like the SSS tier sector and whatnot. But besides that, yeah, I mean, Multiverse is an exquisite game, a lot to consider, but a lot of stuff that kind of goes wrong in playtesting. But besides that, I mean, hey, a lot of different sectors to consider, a lot of different paths a run can take. Overall, just a good sandbox, a good take on FTL sequel, and that's kind of all that matters, really. So that's pretty much the list, and yeah. I guess from here, I'm planning on going back to Forgotten Race content. That should be coming back pretty much within the next 2 weeks, hopefully. I should get back to it pretty quickly. I could lock in and just get it all done and stop playing again pretty often, but I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out. Today's goal is just getting the sector tier list done. I got it done. My voice hasn't hurt more than it has ever before in multiple accounts, but it's okay. We got through it. Sector tier list finally done after all this time, and I hope you enjoyed the list. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, compliments, anything you want to say about just the list in general, you can plop them in the comments below. I'll happily respond. I'll debate. I'll talk, discuss, whatever, with you in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the list. Take care and goodbye.